The Shadow That Took My Brother. A terrifying demon encounter, true horror story. Some demons don't come from haunted houses or cursed objects. Sometimes, they come for the people you love most. Evan never believed in the supernatural, not until the night his younger brother vanished without a sound. It started with a shadow that didn't belong to either of them. A shape that followed his brother everywhere, even in daylight. If you're brave enough to hear what really happened, stay until the end, and subscribe before the shadow finds someone new. Evan never forgot the moment everything changed. It was subtle at first, a small movement in the corner of his vision as he passed his brother Caleb's room. A darker sliver against the dim hallway. At the time, he assumed it was a trick of the light. Houses make shapes, the mind fills gaps, and shadows come and go. Nothing unusual. But later, when he lay awake in bed, he realized something chilling. The shadow had moved when he did, like it was watching. The brothers grew up in a quiet, aging suburban home with creaking pipes and walls that swallowed sound. Their parents worked late shifts, leaving Evan as the protector, the older brother who made sure Caleb brushed his teeth, finished his homework, and stayed safe. He took pride in it. But one afternoon, while they were watching TV, Evan noticed the darkness behind the couch stretch unnaturally long. Not like the sunlight through the blinds. This shadow seemed to be bending, reaching, toward Caleb. He blinked, and it snapped back flat. Caleb didn't notice. He was too busy laughing, unaware that something unseen had taken interest in him. That night, Evan found his brother sitting upright in bed, wide awake but staring directly at a corner of the room. The air felt wrong, too still, heavy, like the atmosphere thickened around them. He asked what Caleb was looking at, but the boy didn't answer. His breathing was shallow, shoulders tense, as if he were being silently confronted by something only he could see. After moments that felt like hours, Caleb slowly lowered his head and finally responded as though waking from a trance. He didn't remember anything. The next day, strange marks appeared on Caleb's arms. Not scratches. Not bruises. Dark impressions, almost like fingerprints, as if something had gripped him tightly while he slept. Their parents dismissed it as roughhousing or bumping into things. But Evan knew his brother. Caleb wasn't clumsy. And those marks were too precise, too deliberate, like a warning. The shadow grew bolder. Evan saw it again in the hallway, then in the kitchen, always near Caleb. It would stretch from corners that had no light source, always forming a tall, thin shape with long limbs and a head tilted just slightly, as though studying its target. Whenever Evan tried to draw attention to it, the figure melted back into the dark before anyone else could see. Caleb's behavior shifted. He became withdrawn, flinched at sudden sounds, and avoided being alone. Sleep stopped bringing rest. Instead, it brought fear. Evan started finding him standing motionless at night, not sleepwalking, but fixed in place, staring into darkness as if listening to instructions whispered from the void. One evening, Evan caught his brother talking to the shadow. Not in words but in soft breaths, like responses to an unheard voice. The demon, if that's what it was, seemed to treat Caleb like prey, testing how far it could reach into the world without being exposed. The shadow appeared even when lights were fully on. Evan saw it looming against a brightly lit wall while Caleb sat at the kitchen table. Shadows shouldn't exist like that, not in defiance of physics. But this one did. When Evan approached, the shape recoiled into the cracks between tiles, surging away like living darkness. Evan confronted Caleb gently, desperate to protect him. His brother hesitated before admitting something horrifying. The shadow visited him in his dreams, and it spoke without using a voice. Promised him protection, friendship, power. It told him that he didn't need anyone else. It told him it would always be there, because it already owned him. Evan reported everything to their parents. They blamed stress, imagination, too many scary movies. But the truth was darker than anything Hollywood had ever filmed. One night, Caleb screamed louder than any child should be able to scream. Evan sprinted into his room and stopped cold. Caleb was pinned against the wall, his feet not touching the floor. His body trembled violently while the shadow stretched up behind him, towering, twisted, like a broken humanoid figure made entirely of void. The temperature plunged. The lights flickered until they failed and the room drowned in pitch-black terror. Then, just as abruptly as it began, Caleb fell. Evan rushed to him, but his brother's eyes weren't normal anymore. They were lifeless, pupils dilated, lost. Evan shook him, calling his name until Caleb finally gasped like someone waking from drowning. After that night, Caleb refused to sleep with the lights off. The shadow, however, didn't care about lighting anymore. The entity followed them to school. Evan caught glimpses of it trailing behind Caleb, crawling along walls like a parasite. Teachers mentioned Caleb seemed spaced out, fatigued, unable to focus. Kids whispered rumors, avoiding him entirely. The shadow was isolating him, the first tactic predators use before taking their prey. Near the end of that horrifying week, Caleb whispered to Evan that the shadow wanted something. A trade. It wanted to take Caleb somewhere, a place with no light, no escape, no return. And if Evan tried to stop it, the shadow would take him instead. Evan never felt fear like that before. Not fear for himself, but fear of losing the person he loved most. He stayed awake every night, watching over his brother. But demons don't get tired. Humans do. One night, Evan's exhaustion betrayed him. His eyes drooped. His breathing slowed. And just seconds after sleep took him, Caleb vanished. His bed was empty. The blanket lay crumpled on the floor. The window was slightly open though it was locked earlier. Cold night air spilled into the room. Evan froze in terror, because the shadow was still there. It stood in the doorway, tall, thin, bent at unnatural angles. Holding out its elongated arm. Something small dangled from its grip, Caleb's necklace. The shadow bowed its head, mocking him. Then it slid backward into the hallway, dissolving into darkness like smoke being sucked into a vent. Caleb was gone, and the demon wanted Evan to follow. Evan didn't remember standing, yet suddenly he was upright, numb, adrenaline flooding his veins. His breath came sharp and uneven as he dashed into the hallway, calling silently in terror for his missing brother. The hallway stretched longer than normal, impossibly long, as if the house itself warped under the influence of whatever had taken Caleb. Walls that once held childhood drawings now looked decayed and bruised, the wallpaper peeling like dead skin. He couldn't see the shadow, but he felt it. A cold pressure pushing him forward, insisting that he follow. Every step echoed into the stillness as if the world around him was hollow. The front door stood open. It swayed rhythmically like someone had just passed through. Outside, the night sky appeared starless, a bleak endless void reflecting the crushing dread inside Evan's chest. He knew he should call for help. His parents, police, anyone, but deep down he understood something horrifying. Humans could not save Caleb from this. This was not a kidnapping. It was a claiming. Barefoot, Evan sprinted into the darkness. The neighborhood streetlights flickered violently, and one by one they blinked out, plunging each block into darkness as he ran past. The entire world seemed to be retreating into shadow behind him. The only remaining illumination came from the moon, a pale sickle barely strong enough to guide him. He followed the faint trail, crushed leaves, small footprints in the dew-slick grass, the occasional glimmer from Caleb's necklace charm lying abandoned like breadcrumbs. The trail led toward the woods behind the neighborhood, a place children were warned not to go after sunset. Evan had always ignored those stories, chalking them up to local superstition. Now, he wished he had listened. The trees loomed ahead like skeletal giants, and the wind made a low, unsettling moan as it passed through them. The deeper Evan moved into the woods, the more unnatural everything felt. The environment seemed drained of life. Insects didn't chirp, leaves didn't rustle, and the forest floor carried not a single sign of living creatures. Only darkness. Evan's chest tightened as he reached a clearing. The moonlight illuminated something impossible. The shadows had physical presence here. They twisted around tree trunks like serpents, curling up branches as though spying on him. The air felt electrically charged with malevolent intent. Then he saw him. Caleb stood at the edge of the clearing, back turned, motionless. His pajamas torn, hair messy, feet dirty. Evan's instinct was to sprint to him and drag him to safety, to get him out before the shadow returned. But as he approached slowly, every instinct screamed that something was wrong. Caleb's posture was too rigid, too unnaturally still. The boy normally fidgeted, always shifting, always moving, but here he looked frozen. The shadow reappeared. It rose from the ground beneath Caleb's feet like ink spilling upward. The form towered over him, taller than before, limbs stretched thin as though pulled by invisible hooks. Its head hung low, like a puppet disengaged from its strings. Evan's fear wasn't just in his mind anymore. It was physical. It clawed his insides. His knees trembled. The entity wanted him to watch. Caleb slowly rotated his head, not his body, just his head, turning far past the range of human anatomy. His face was blank, pupils swallowed by darkness, expression empty but aware. The shadow extended an arm toward Evan, silent but commanding. The meaning was clear: join us. Evan refused to move. Even in the presence of something that could unmake him with a mere thought, one truth dug deeper than fear. His purpose was to protect Caleb. To run now would mean salvation for one and doom for the other. That was never an option. He stepped closer. The shadow reacted, shrinking suddenly, then exploding outward in a violent surge. The clearing darkened completely as if the moon was swallowed whole. Evan staggered backward, unable to perceive direction. The smell of soil and rot filled his lungs. He felt a hand, small, shaking, grip his own. Caleb. Not the shadow. Not the puppet. His brother. Terrified. That fleeting touch reignited Evan's strength. With raw determination, he seized Caleb's wrist and pulled him away from the entity, sprinting blindly back through the woods. Branches whipped at them, roots tripped them, but Evan refused to let go. He dragged Caleb, heart hammering, lungs burning, until he saw the faintest glow of streetlight in the distance. Civilization, safety, hope. But the demon didn't let prey escape willingly. A crushing chill slammed into them, sending both crashing to the ground. The world dimmed again. Shadows slithered along the soil, curling around Caleb's ankles like chains. Evan clawed frantically at the darkness, his fingers sinking through it like thick tar. For a brief moment, he felt the shadow burn cold through his skin, an icy agony spreading like venom. Caleb's body lifted from the ground again, pulled relentlessly toward the trees. Evan held on, digging his nails into Caleb's wrist until blood surfaced. He wasn't strong enough. The shadow was ancient, endless. It wanted Caleb, and it would tear Evan apart to get to him. But then, the smallest miracle. Caleb spoke, not with words but with action. Through pure instinct, he twisted his body just enough to break the shadow's grip and collapsed into Evan's arms. And they ran again. They didn't stop until their home was in sight. They burst through the front door, slamming it behind them. The house lights flickered violently but remained lit. Evan locked every door, every window, knowing locks were meaningless against something immaterial, but desperation made him do it anyway. Caleb collapsed on the staircase, trembling, whispering silent pleas for safety. Evan wrapped his arms around him, holding tightly, promising without words that he would not let the shadow take him again. The rest of the night crawled by without sleep. The shadow lurked just outside the home, its presence scraping against the walls, waiting. Sometimes a tall silhouette appeared through the front window, not approaching, just watching. The demon understood patience. Humans tired. Fear wore them down. And shadows existed forever. The sun finally rose, not that it brought comfort. Caleb had grown pale, sunken, drained of something essential. The shadow hadn't just tried to take his body. It was consuming his spirit. Evan reached out to priests, doctors, anyone who might help. Each person gave rational explanations: stress, sleep disorders, trauma. No one believed what he'd seen. And every night, the shadow returned stronger, clawing deeper into their lives. The worst moment came 2 weeks later. Caleb sat silently at the dining table, eyes lifeless. His skin looked gray. He wasn't Caleb anymore. Or at least, not fully. Evan realized something devastating. The demon never left the woods empty-handed. It had taken a piece of Caleb with it. It would come back for the rest. Some shadows follow us only when light exists. But there are others, the kind that stalk from corners where light never reaches. Evan saved his brother once, but demons don't accept defeat. They wait. They dig into the cracks of your fear and return stronger every night until you finally stop fighting back. So tonight, before you turn off the lights, look into the darkest corner of your room. If something is already watching you, remember, it might not be your shadow,